Welcome to the Elevate Your Leadership podcast series with U.S. Navy Special Operations veteran, CEO, and hockey fanatic Bob Pizzini. Bob discusses leadership, success, failure, defining moments, and hard lessons learned with guests who are intentional in their approach to leadership. Leadership is a perishable skill. Use it or lose it. In this series, entrepreneurs, industry executives, academics, public figures, and other highly effective professionals share their formulas for success with you.
Welcome, everybody, to the Elevate Your Leadership podcast with me, your host, Bob Pizzini. Hopefully, you've listened to recent and not so recent episodes. Every single episode I've had has been a great episode because I have guests who have such valuable information to share with our listeners, and by you simply listening to the discussion that I have with my great guests, it will bring great value to you in your personal life, and it will bring great value to you and your organization. Today's guest has been a colleague in the Navy. He's a retired Navy EOD technician and a personal friend for many, many years. And Trevor Maxwell is on the show today. And before I formally welcome Trevor, let me just read his bio briefly. Trevor Maxwell completed over 20 years of service in the United States Navy, the majority of that time as an explosive ordnance disposal, what we call EOD, technician, retiring as a senior chief petty officer in 2018. He began his career in financial services at a small firm in Norfolk, Virginia, in the Norfolk, Virginia Beach area. He joined the U.S. Vet Wealth team in 2020. He has volunteered as an executive coach for the Honor Foundation. I participate with that organization as well, which is a nonprofit organization that provides military transition education and mentoring to transitioning special operators in particular, but also support people who served at these special operations commands. Trevor has a bachelor's degree in business administration from St. Leo University and holds the highly coveted Chartered Financial Consultant marks and Advanced Financial Planning designation from the American College of Financial Services. Over the last 6 plus years, Trevor has helped hundreds of career military families make important financial decisions to prepare them not just for their military retirement, but for everything that lies beyond. His vision for U.S. Vet Wealth is to become the preeminent financial resource for all service members preparing for their military transition, and that one day all future generations of veterans will embrace his motto, stop working for your money, start making it work for you. Trevor, all that is awesome, and I know you, and I know you're sincere, and I know that you wrote this with your heart. Welcome to the podcast, brother.
Yeah, thanks. You're making me blush a little bit. So.
All right. Well, we'll adjust the lighting here.
Yeah.
So no, it's good stuff, man. I know you act based on your heart. You act with sincerity. It's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show, amongst many other things. There is a lot of stuff in your bio here that I want to dive into, but I want to start this show the way I do most other shows, which is learning how Trevor Maxwell became Trevor Maxwell, and it usually starts with your upbringing. So where did you grow up?
Yeah, so I grew up in a town called Fairmont, West Virginia. We're famous for a couple of other people from there. Nick Saban, former coach of Alabama, the GOAT. Mary Lou Retton, she was a 1984 Olympic gold medalist. And Woody Williams, he was the last surviving Medal of Honor recipient from World War II.
Wow. Holy cow.
Yeah. And then me, of course. Yeah, that's
Well, we're going to get into your military career because I know amongst your many decorations, you have the Purple Heart, which means you were wounded in combat. And hopefully you'll be willing to share that story with us a little bit later. So growing up in that tiny town, is it a tiny town in West Virginia?
It's 20,000, so it's not super small. There's like
It's pretty small, man.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I consider like super small, like a few hundred.
500.
People, right. Yeah. So there's a north central West Virginia. There's 3 cities there. Morgantown, where WVU is. That's where most people, when you talk about West Virginia, you say Morgantown. They say So Fairmont's about 15 miles south of that, and then you have Clarksburg, which is 15 miles south of Fairmont. So it's like this little kind of region there. There's 3 cities within 40 miles of each other.
Okay. So within those 3 cities, sports, did you play sports as a kid?
I did. I played Little League. I played soccer. It wasn't a huge part. My big thing, I always liked mountain biking and going out in the middle of the woods and with my friends, getting all kinds of trouble out there. Yeah. Catching snakes.
Yeah, right. Okay. All right. Did you hunt? Did you grow up hunting and fishing?
Yeah, I did. I did a little bit of hunting. Not as much as a lot of other kids that grew up out there, but I was always, kind of outside doing things. I think about how much my kids are inside now today, and I'm like, man, I don't get that.
No, it's my kids too, and my wife grew up on a farm in New Mexico, and it drives her nuts to see. I mean, our kids are 20, but and we tried to be real active with them, but now that is the society that we live in for the most part, and there's studies on it, and it's actually unfortunate, but.
I will say this, I make an effort to take them places. Like we go to Shenandoah National Park a lot, and they love that.
Cool.
Actually, they were both asking me, hey, when are we going to go back to Shenandoah National Park?
You have 2 boys, right?
Yep.
How old are they?
13 and 16.
Okay. Wow. So they lived through some of at least your older ones.
Well,
some of your.
I will say this, they're my stepsons. They're from my wife's previous marriage, but I met them, so we've been together for
10 years.
13 years.
Oh, okay.
Well, we've been together for 13 years. We are married for 10. So we just had our 10th wedding anniversary. But they've, I've been around them since they were 1 and 4. So, yeah, they've grown up around me. They came into my life towards the tail end. So I did do a couple of deployments. I call them deployments because I was deploying to Florida for a few months at a time.
Yeah. Oh man, those are the best deployments you can get in the Navy. Well, I don't know if they're the best, but they're pretty damn good.
They were not bad. I mean, we worked a deal with a couple of people that owned some beach houses and stayed there over the winter months.
Yeah.
So I'm not complaining.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so sports, high school job? Do you have any high school jobs?
No. I'll tell you, I had a little bit of a bumpy road in my high school age. So
surprise.
Yeah, I kind of, like a lot of guys that come from, our backgrounds, I got into school, was not, I did play football for a little bit, but I got into doing a lot of bad kid stuff, and I ended up dropping out of high school after my sophomore year, and I went to this it's like a military academy. It's basically Army boot camp, like 6 months of Army boot camp with school.
Did a judge send you there?
No, it was like me. That would have been the next step, though.
Yeah.
I could have done this on my own volition, or, probably a judge would have forced me to go to something like that.
All right.
But they call them the Challenge Academies. And so it's run by the National Guard. There's actually one in Virginia Beach down the road here at Camp Pendleton. They have one there, too. A bunch of states have them. But, yeah, it's like 6 months of Army boot camp, and then you do school and stuff, and then you take the test to get your good enough diploma at the end of your GED.
Okay.
And so I went there and crushed it. And, so I finished that when I was 16, and that's when I really kind of realized, like, okay, I think this military lifestyle is the ticket for me, because I got in there and I loved it. It really
found your groove,
kind of resonated with me, and so I was like, all right, that's what I'm going to do. As soon as I turn 17, I'm going to go sign up and go join. Originally, I wanted to join the Marine Corps, go infantry. Yeah. We had a few of our drill instructors there that were like force recon guys, and that's what I wanted to do eventually. And I let a bunch of other people talk me into stuff because I got a really good school in the ASVAB. They said, no, you should go do this. So originally I had signed up to join the Navy as a fire controlman. So working on electronics.
Okay. So that takes a big brain and a big, so ASVAB. So let me just catch the listeners up on a couple of things. So first, as a PSA, and I mean this is sincerely as a public service announcement, Trevor was struggling in high school. He dropped out. He voluntarily went to a 6-month military-style program, which taught him discipline, also taught him academics and got him through high school. And I have heard this story from so many people, so many retired military folks who had a similar childhood experience, and they went through something, and myself included, although I completed high school in the town that I grew up in, I had to enlist. I needed to change my scenery, my setting, and there was a discipline within me that I knew needed to come to the forefront. And so parents, if you're struggling with your kids, consider alternatives. It's not everybody's the same, and we all go through struggles, and there's some great alternatives out there. Our daughter, for example, coming back into high school during and after COVID, it was just really too much of a struggle. And so we did online high school through Liberty University. She has a very prestigious high school diploma. And so consider alternatives. Okay, man, sorry for the rabbit hole.
No, that's cool. Just to kind of to get on top of that, what you were talking about, I was reminded of several years ago when I was still active. I was down in Florida, quote unquote, on deployment, and they were doing a working group there for, the master board requirements for the master EOD technician. So if you're not familiar, if you're listening to this, basically as EOD, we have 3 levels. You have your basic technicians, you have your senior technicians, and you have your master technicians. And so they had a big group of senior enlisted guys down there talking about these requirements. And a buddy of mine that you know very well too, Mike, was the CMC at the time, Man Master Chief. He said, "Hey, when you guys break for lunch, go to the chow hall and have lunch with the students. Go talk to them. It'll be good for you guys. It'll be good for them." And that experience blew my mind because we went in there.
What a great idea.
Yeah.
Go have lunch with the EOD students.
Yeah. So we get
definitely going through EOD school. That's awesome. Seasoned guys who have been on deployment, been to the war zone, have awards, Purple Hearts such as yourself, and now you're sitting at the chow hall with students.
Yep. I think it was a little intimidating for them. But, we came in, we weren't instructors, so we didn't have that mentality. But, we're just, hey, how's it going, guys? Can I sit with you? They're sitting there like, yes, so you're, I'm like, hey, you can call me Trevor. All right. I'm trying to be like, hey, this is what it's going to be like when you get out of here.
Instructor's mojo there.
I'm like, hey, I'm not an instructor. This is how we this is how we talk to each other, in the, when you get to where you're going. But, I was really kind of taken aback because I started talking to all these students, and this is, 14 years, whatever, after I finished EOD school, and I'm getting to know these kids, and they're like, yeah, I got a bachelor's. These are like E2s, E3s, young enlisted guys. They're like, yeah, I got a bachelor's in electrical engineering. We talked to this junior officer. He's like, yeah, I just finished my my PhD in theoretical physics. Wow. And we're sitting there like, oh my God, if you had come into the chow hall when we were there and said,
you were a student, you mean?
Yeah, as a student, first of all, the chow hall was nowhere near as nice as it is now, but it was like, yeah, judge told me to join the Navy or go to jail, right? So I was thinking about like what you were saying. It just really resonated with me.
Evolution, yeah.
One of the other funny things about the, my path, because I had my GED, I had to go to school. I had to go to college and get 15 college credits before I joined the Navy.
Really? Just to be able to enlist?
Yeah. They were for the program that I was under.
Which was FC?
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
So real quick, folks, FC, Fire Control Technician. That's the CWIS, so the R2-D2 looking thing that you see on ships that fires, 3,000 rounds a minute, something like that?
Yeah, depending on which block. There's one that's 3,000, and I think there's one that's 4,500. I don't know what block they're on now.
So highly complex weapon systems. And so Trevor's job was to maintain these things electronically, amongst other things. So very big brain required for that. Huge brain required for that.
Yeah. And it's, I liked it though. As like the technical kind of stuff that really appealed to me. But
was that like a 6-year contract?
It was.
So advanced, or you get like push button E5?
E4.
E4. Okay.
So I made E4 in like 10 months.
Okay.
So, before I joined, though, I had to go get some college credits. So there's a university there, Fairmont State University, in my hometown. My grandma used to be a dorm master there, and so she took me. She's friends with the president of the college, And so she takes me in to meet the president of this college so I can get in and do these credits. And I walk in and the lady goes, "Oh, I remember you. You're the one that my grandma worked in the dorm. Sometimes she would babysit us." She goes, "Oh, I remember you. You're the one that peed on my car when you were like 4 years old." And
Yeah, some things just never go away, dude.
yeah, I was like, "Oh, cool. This is going great. My plan is working." But I got in, and I thought this was something that I tell a lot of people about. Around the same time, my dad was getting divorced from my stepmother, and he was also getting laid off from the coal mines. So my generation, my family there in West Virginia, we're kind of the first generation that didn't go to work in the coal mines. So like, my dad, my grandpa, his dad was in World War I and went to work in the coal mines. My grandpa was in World War II, went to work in the coal mines. My dad and his brother went to Vietnam. They went to work in the coal mines. My generation, no, we didn't work in the coal mines. We kind of spread out and went all over the country. And
was the deer hunter, was your neck of the woods represented in
yeah, it's pretty close. I mean, it's Pennsylvania. If you look at southwestern Pennsylvania, north central West Virginia, it's the same area.
Okay, gotcha. Right? Yeah.
It's the same people. It's the same kind of thing.
Right. Talking about the movie The Deer Hunter.
Yeah. So I've watched that movie several times too, and I think, yeah, I knew a lot of people like that.
Yeah, but, right. Okay.
So my dad was getting laid off from the coal mines, and instead of waiting to get called back to work, he took advantage of the Clean Air Act money, and he started going back to college, which for him, that was tough, because he graduated high school in 1967, or 66. So he's in there trying to learn all this stuff for the first time. I had an algebra class with him in college. Yeah.
Isn't that cool?
We didn't tell anybody that we were father and son. People thought we were brothers, actually.
You guys were in the classroom together?
Yeah. I sat right in front of him.
Brick and mortar. Wow.
So, yeah, I had an algebra class with my dad in college, but
that is pretty cool.
Yeah.
So I'll just make a quick note here. So you went to school. That was when you had to get the 15 semester hours, I guess, or just so you could enlist in the Navy and go do that FC rating.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So what did your dad go on to do?
So he got a degree in aviation maintenance, finished that up, moved down to Savannah to work at Gulfstream.
Wow. I bet you his life circumstances significantly improved.
It did. Yeah. He bought a little house. He lived in a cruddy little apartment for a little bit.
Yeah.
Got his feet under him, bought a house, which he still lives in today.
Oh, that's cool, man.
26 years later.
Yeah.
But he retired when he was 60. So he's 76 now. So he retired 14 years ago at 62.
Wow, that's cool.
And it's funny, he's busier now than he was when he worked.
I'm almost afraid to truly retire myself because there's a lot of work to do in retirement, I can tell. Staying healthy being like the primary thing.
Oh, he is too. I mean, he's in really for a 70. If you looked at him, you would never guess that he's 76.
Yeah.
So he still goes to the gym. He's he does.
Awesome.
He stays active. He's got a job working the flags on a corner at a racetrack down there. He volunteers at the Mighty 8th Air Force Museum. They're restoring a B-17.
That's cool.
And he still works in there 2 or 3 times. That was neat because I got to go into the museum and see it and go inside the airplane. And I put a picture on LinkedIn several years ago of me and him sitting in the cockpit.
That's cool. That's cool. We're going to have to find that. So, what's your LinkedIn handle real quick? We're going to say this at the end. But
it's LinkedIn. It's just Trevor C. Maxwell.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So find Trevor C. Maxwell on LinkedIn. We're going to talk more about the social handles later. But I just want to say one thing real quick. So when I was working on my degree, and I did like associates, bachelor's, graduate. But during my associates, my girlfriend at the time, who is now my wife, she had already been through college algebra and all that stuff, but I was an algebra kind of sloth, so real slow on the uptake. And so my then girlfriend went through algebra for a second time just to drag me through it. And so teamwork, man, teamwork. So,
yeah.
Okay, so you did that, you were successful, and you enlisted, and then what?
So yeah, I went through the FC pipeline. The one my pipeline was extremely long. So, normally the pipeline's about a year, a little under a year.
Mm-hmm.
So, left there, went to C school. That's when I moved to Virginia. C school is, so like A school would be where you get your job, like fire controlman.
It's your basic
right.
training in that skill set.
C
It's
school,
a technical school.
yeah. C school is like an advanced school where you learn a particular system.
Okay.
And so, there was
A school, Great Lakes.
Yep. And in C school, I came down here to Damnack.
Okay.
That was 1999. So I've lived here for 26 years now.
Okay.
For the most part. And came down here. That was like a 9-month school, something like that.
Wow, that's a long school, man.
Yeah. I had a couple of months sitting in X Division where we just, went out and did whatever work we could do until I classed up. And I finished that and checked into my first actual real command in January 2000, the USS Enterprise.
Okay, cool. All right, so you're on an aircraft carrier.
Yep.
That's cool. That's awesome. So did you do a med?
Yep, I did 3 deployments on there.
So Mediterranean cruise?
Yep, those were fun. I got I'll tell you another story later about Afghanistan, but no, had a great time on there. We're hitting a port every 2 weeks. I was kind of worried because I wasn't saving money because we were hitting so many ports. But that was my first deployment. I turned 21, went on deployment, hit these ports, and on our way home, I was sleeping in my rack. So I volunteered to work night shift whenever I could. It was nice because I had less people around to tell me what to do.
Yeah, right.
But I got in my rack and went to sleep. And then it was the afternoon. I think you're like 7 hours ahead there. So it was about 1600. That's when I normally woke up to go start my shift. And the captain came over the 1MC. So the 1MC, if you didn't know, that's like the intercom for the ship. And had told us that the Twin Towers had been attacked and the Pentagon had attacked. And instead of us going home and doing a bunch of cool port visits on the way, we turned around and did boxes in the ocean for, I think it was 95 days we stayed out to sea after that.
Wow.
for 9/11. So us and the Theodore Roosevelt, who we had just turned over with, stayed out there, and we were the first ones to launch strikes against Afghanistan.
Okay. Wow. So that being the carrier, so the carrier strike group, the carrier strike group, but the air wing as well, obviously. Yep. Yeah. Okay. All right. So at what point and how did you discover EOD?
Well, actually, the first time I had really learned about EOD was on that deployment. So the way they used to do it, they always had like a SEAL platoon and an EOD detachment there on the carrier. The SEAL platoon, I think, was there for combat and search and rescue. And then the EOD guys were there for the flight deck support, right? Because we put ordnance on all these aircraft. If something happens, if a piece of ordnance gets damaged or something like that, they have EOD guys there to handle that, do their procedures. And so that was the first time I had met EOD guys. And I think more people knew about the SEALs.
Of course. They
have
got movies, they got books.
They have a little stronger branding. But even then, keep in mind, this is pre-GWATs. Even then, they weren't as popular as they are now. But then I saw these EOD guys, and somebody was like, yeah, they do all this stuff. They do the jumping, they do the diving, they do disarm bombs. And that kind of stuck out on the page for me because there was like a technical aspect to it, which I was like, oh, I like that. Technical stuff. I get to work on something.
Yeah. Well, you're already an advanced electronics guy.
Yeah. So that really appealed to me. And I kind of sat on that. We came back from that deployment, did a yard period, like 16 months in the shipyard, which if you've never been in the shipyard, that is a long time to be in the shipyard. And it was excruciating. It was not a great work environment. But my second deployment, so it was 2 deployments on Enterprise, not 3. My second deployment, my senior chief, he was the surface warfare coordinator for the ship. And so we always had people coming to our shop to say, hey, I'm here. I want to get my ESWAS pin. So
yeah. So just for the listeners, there's a qualification process on board naval vessels called Enlisted Surface Warfare Specialist. And even though you're an electronics guy who maintains this one particular weapon system, you would go around to all the other departments on the ship and become somewhat smart on what everybody else does. And there's a signature and a qualification process, and you actually get a warfare device that you wear on your uniform. So what Trevor's talking about is people will come to your shop to get the knowledge of what you guys do, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then that's, they come in there and do their test and all that. So we always had people in our shop. We had to proctor the test for them. So one day, a few EOD guys walk in, and I was just looking at them. I was like sitting there thinking, I don't know, maybe I was mad about somebody I worked with or whatever. And I was like, I got to do something here. Because in the back of my head, I had said this years ago, like when I had finished that Mountaineer Challenge Academy, I was like, I want to go jump out of planes and blow stuff up. And, all my family's like, no, you need to go, do this, work on electronics, do whatever. So it was like a switch flipped, and I went and talked to the guy, and I was like, hey, how did you get into that job? And I started talking to the guy. And
do you remember who it was?
Yeah, it was Eddie.
Griffiths?
No, not Griffiths. Eddie, skinny guy, had a mustache. Heck, I wish I could remember his name. But he told me, he said, yeah, we'll go talk to, back then each detachment, what they used to call them, had a recruiter.
Right.
They go talk to this guy, Brian Coffey.
Okay.
And said, yeah. So I went and talked to him, and he's like, okay, well, start, if you want to do it, you got to be in shape. So come PT with us every day. Let's go through, you got to get the medical stuff done. He showed me all the requirements. Mm-hmm. I had to talk to my detailer because I was up for orders when I came back from that deployment. So I said, hey, I'm looking at trying to do the COD thing. Can you release me? And he said, yeah. So I put together my screening package. I took the tests, barely passed the swim. So I did start PTing with them every day. So they did a big, the big school circle in the hangar bay every afternoon, and we would go out there and do calisthenics for like an hour and a half. And that, oh man, that smoked me. The one thing I couldn't do was work on my swimming. And I thought that I was a decent swimmer because we used to go swim in the river all the time. And then I get out there, we go do the swim test in Bahrain. And it was bad. I barely passed it.
Okay, well, hey, man, barely pass is pass. You get rid of the B and just call it a P, a pass.
So, I got by the skin of my teeth, and somebody told me, they said, yeah, you should go do this mud pup thing over. It's, mud pups, they call it PSI, Perspective School Indoctrinate, I think is what I said.
Yeah.
But you go work at a EOD command, you PT a lot, you do a lot of water stuff because that's what dive school is all about.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go work for the teams. You're supposed to, when I became the mud pup class leader, I was like, hey, if these guys are just making you clean their cage, then you're not doing that. If they're taking you out and teaching you things like, hey, here's how you tie these knots, here's how you do this, like, that's cool. But you're supposed to go learn from the detachments that are there. And at the same time, we went to the pool there at Little Creek twice a week for 2 hours and did a lot of pool work, did the bay swims, did the slick swims. I started working on my technique for my side stroke. My swim time got a lot better. But that was great. It was 6 months. The ship was going and doing a surge to support the Olympics. They said, yeah, we don't need him.
Well, you're lucky, man. You had a good chain of command that lets you do that.
Yeah, they said we can cut him loose early and he can go do this mud pup thing.
Yeah, wow.
And so, yeah, I went and did that for 6 months. That was probably like my favorite time of my career because...
Mobile Unit 2?
Yeah, Mobile Unit 2. It's 2004. I was there for 6 months, and all I did was PT every day.
What was your rank at the time?
I was a FC2.
Okay.
So I was the mud pup class leader.
Yeah.
Got to meet some people, so that was good. I got an early start on building some relationships with people, which when I would come back, I wasn't just some new guy that everybody knew. A lot of guys were like, "Oh, hey, welcome back, brother. Good to see you." And
that's awesome.
it was a great time. The one thing I didn't like about that was there was like a couple of guys that love to mess with the mud pups. And so I would think it's 3:00. We would get everything clean in the command. We're in the dive locker. I talked to the LPO of the dive locker who I worked for, and I said, "Hey, we're good to go. Can we do our end of the day formation and cut out maybe a little bit early?" And he'd say, "Yeah." Without fail, it seemed like somebody knew, like, hey, they're all in formation in the dive locker, all the mud pups are. Some new guy, whatever, somebody had something to prove would come in, and he would go up to probably whoever was for lack of a better word, the dumbest guy in there and ask him a question. And when he didn't know, he would drop him. When one drops, we all drop.
Lean and rest.
Yeah.
Push-ups means we're doing push-ups.
So, we would go from hopefully we're going to get out of here at a decent hour to now it's 5 p.m. We're in uniform and we're soaked with sweat. So now I got to go home and wash my uniform and iron it and everything and be ready for the next day. So that I think prepared me for some of the rigors of not just EOD and dive school, but like EOD in general. It's just expect the unexpected. Don't make any assumptions about when the work's going to be done.
Yeah. No, that's true, man. That's it can be very disappointing at times, but if you get your mindset right, which is not always easy, it helps you get through it.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to take a quick moment here to talk about Magic Mind. You talked about energy, right? And in Navy EOD, you got to have energy. And EOD is also a very academic job. You have to have mental clarity. We literally disarm nuclear weapons amongst all the other weapon systems that are out there. And it takes a team that's very focused, and everybody in that team has to have mental clarity. In my current role, managing partner and chief executive officer of a company with 40 people, public figure, podcast host, etc., I have to have mental clarity. I use something called Magic Mind. Magic Mind has all natural ingredients: ashwagandha, lion's mane, agave, turmeric, just to name a few. It's a 2-ounce shot, and this is a new nootropic, and neurotropic, and this is something that gives me energy and mental clarity that lasts for a long period of time. I always talk about a peak state. I want to be in a peak state, very, very highly analytical. I can solve complex problems. Magic Mind will help you do that. If you go to magicmind.com/EYLJAN, that's EYLJAN, you will get 45% off of whatever quantity of Magic Mind you order. So 2-ounce shot, you do one of them a day. I'm going to do this one right now on camera because I think it actually tastes kind of good. magicmind.com/EYLJAN, receive 45% off. All right. So you mud pupped, you got through that experience, you went to EOD school, you completed EOD school, then what?
So then I went back.
Any drama in EOD school?
Oh, well, I did fail the pull-ups the first day of dive school. So I got the flu, right as I started dive school. And they didn't care. It was like, hey, you're going to get rolled, whatever. And I was like, nope, I'm just going to do it. So, luckily I was young and in very good shape. I think I only did 5 versus 6 pull-ups. I got off the 5th one because I started throwing up. But I got out there, I did everything else, completed it. So they said, hey, you failed your PT test. You're going to take it again tomorrow. And if you fail it then you're out of here. I was like, okay, I'm not going back to the fleet. Like, I've already made it this far. I put up with too much to not make it through. So yeah, I just girded down, got through, passed that. And it's funny, I think dive school used to be the big area where they would weed out people.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's
50% attrition rate.
Yeah. So now they have a course before that up at Great Lakes. So all the people who want to go into the SEALs or EOD, they all do the same boot camp together because they all have a lot of the same kind of physical requirements, which I think is smart. You're taking all these guys that are doing kind of the same thing, that have the same requirements, and training them to this, what is probably a higher standard for certain things. And then they go to this pre-course, prep course, I think is what they call it.
Mm-hmm.
They're teaching them a lot of things that they're going to need to be successful. And they're weeding out the people that they don't think will complete it, which I think is a lot smarter way of doing business because we had a lot of, the class before us started with like 34 and they graduated 11.
Yeah. Yeah.
My class, I think we started with 33 and graduated 21. We were the first class in years to have more than 20 people graduate.
Yeah. I was an instructor at Navy Dive School from 96 to 99. And, every day we would try and figure out how to reduce the attrition rate. And that program up at Great Lakes, what do they call those companies? They call them, there's a name for if you're going to be diver EOD.
Yeah, I forget, like the dive, they had the dive motivator.
Yeah.
Like a recruiter.
They called those companies something special up in boot camp. But,
Yeah.
so
800 or something like that, 800 divisions.
Yeah, but the attrition was still and is still an issue, and
Yeah.
and if you, at the end of the day, you got to have that quality person coming out of the pipeline who's a problem solver, who's a physical machine and a problem solver, and that's what it takes to be Navy EOD. It's the same thing with Navy SEALs, and
be able to do it in a very austere environment. That's
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Which we'll talk more about that.
Yeah, well, let's get onto that. So, boom, you finish. What's your first command?
I came back to Mobile Unit 2. So I'd already been there as a mud pup. I already had a house here in the area. So I said, I'll go back to Mobile Unit 2. And that was cool. That was 2005.
Okay, so we're knee deep in Afghanistan. Were we in Iraq yet?
Yes.
Okay.
I think Iraq was 2003?
Okay. All right. That sounds right. Okay. So was one of those locations your first deployment?
Yeah. So my first deployment, I got put on an NSW team, which is really rare for like new guys.
Newbie. So NSW means Naval Special Warfare. So he got your platoon?
Yeah.
So his platoon was assigned to a SEAL team.
Well, we were a det at the time.
Oh, yeah,
It made the change.
Yeah.
When we came back from that deployment, we were Det 2 of Mobile Unit 8 to Mobile Unit 12 had stood up while we were on deployment. So now we were part of Mobile Unit 12. We were Platoon 12-4.
Okay. So a little EOD history there. Historically, since the inception of Navy EOD, which is 1941, we would deploy in a detachment structure. And then now 2008,
it would have been 2007, 2008. They became platoons.
Yeah, we switched over to a platoon structure, which mirrors kind of what SEAL team does and other special forces. So, okay.
Yeah. So, went and did the workup. That's where I met, Mike Riggs, who's now has been my early mentor, my first team chief. And, I'll talk more about that, later too, but it's how we kind of had a little bit of a role reversal as in regards of military transition. So met Mike, had a great team there. A couple other guys on the team, one of which, Scott Dayton, who I had gone to EOD school with, and he and I became pretty good friends there. So we did our first team together and, did our workup. That had its own sets of challenges. And then as we, finished the EOD portion of our workup, we went over, checked in to SEAL Team 2, got to meet our teams there, all the platoons we were attached to there, did their workup as well, which that was an eye-opening experience. That was... that's kind of a surreal thing because here, I talk to people about this that are like, when I do coaching for somebody who's going through military transition, especially an EOD guy, like, hey, here you're going to this unit. And we do this all the time. Like for us as EOD, because we get farmed out to go work with everybody else, it's nothing new for us. So somebody's like, hey, you're going to go into this job and do this thing that you've never done before. How do you think you'll adapt to that? Well, I've done that several times. I go over to the SEAL troop and say, hey, I'm not a SEAL, I'm an EOD tech. I have to learn your skill set and be proficient enough at it to where you feel comfortable having me watch your back in combat, right? So that's not an easy task. Like, what they do and be good enough to where they trust you, to where they take you into combat. Like that's a huge thing there, right? It's no small feat, because these are, and it also did another thing for me. It broke down a lot of preconceptions I had about all of these different units. When I got over there, SEAL Team 2 was the first one I went to. 3 troop, went in, met the guys. I had this like thing in my head where I was like, there's going to be guys in there like cleaning guns, blindfolded, hanging upside down and sharpening their knives. And no, it was a bunch of just regular guys like us, worked in PT gear at the command. They'd put their uniforms on if they had to go do a meeting, but just like us, they're walking around with their green notebooks, taking care of all their gear and stuff while we're there, preparing to go somewhere to train. And it's a lot of, hey, we're going to get the work done, just the work ethic, the competency of the people, the attitude that they had, the dedication towards, professionalism. I see there's a lot of bad stuff being put out on social media now. All these people that want to make names for themselves talking about these guys are bad, these guys are bad. I think one of the big things that I learned is like, no matter where you're at, you're going to have really good people and you're going to have a couple of bad people.
Mm-hmm.
The more elite that you get to, the number of bad people that you're going to have is going to be significantly reduced, because it's just, where they say adversity doesn't build character, it reveals it. So that's one of the hallmarks of that we look for when we're screening for people.
I'd say it does both.
Yeah.
It builds it and reveals
it.
Yeah.
Well, I think it shows you like, hey, you do have character, you do have tenacity, you do have mental toughness, if you're willing to.
Let's go back. You mentioned Scott Dayton. Just tell the listeners about Scott Dayton.
So, I'll tell you my story of him. I met him when we started EOD school. So he had gone to EOD school previously and failed out, worked with the mammals over in San Diego for a couple years, came back, started over again with our class. And that was where I met him.
At Eglin? So no dive school? He started with you guys at Eglin?
Yeah, so he had already been to dive school and done that. He was actually in EOD school and then failed out and then came back several years later. Scott was a former boatswain mate. He was a plank owner of the USS Cole. He had left before the attack happened on the USS Cole, but I know that was something that was kind of near and dear to his heart. He had a picture of him re-enlisting on the anchor of the ship. Like, sticking out.
That's cool. So cool.
But he was a proud boatswain mate too. So
sure. That's where boatswain mates belong.
Yeah. But, I had met him the first day, like we were in class together. Like every class at DoD school, we all hung out together. And I remember like there was a moment, I think that I remember becoming friends with him. There was a song playing on the radio at the guy's house we were at. And there was 3 people who knew the words. No. We were at somebody's house.
Okay.
It was Rick Cody's apartment, actually. We all lived in that, the apartment complex right there off of Range Road. A bunch of us lived there. And so we're in Rick Cody's house. And Scott got there. We were having a get-together before we went out. And there was a song that's played on the radio. And the 3 people that knew the words of the song and started singing it was Rick, Scott, and me. And we all looked at each other and had that that stepbrother moment. Like, we just become best friends, right?
Yeah, the magic moment.
So Scott and I were pretty much together for the entire rest of EOD school because we failed out of guided missiles together, rolled into a surface class together, finished that, and then I think, we worked in different spots in XDiv, but then we classed up with the next Navy class to finish EOD school. and then went to Moby Unit 2 together and did our first team together.
Okay. All right.
So
And so that was and that's when you went to a SEAL team. But was that did you deploy to Iraq or Afghanistan?
yep. The troop I was attached to, we deployed to Baghdad.
Okay.
We were responsible for a lot of the Iranian stuff, the EFP network.
Yes. Yeah. That's what I did when I was there. But I was down in Basra. I was down in the south.
So
Bara.
yeah, but we were there at Baghdad. There was a big camp there that had a bunch of different special operations elements there, U.S. and foreign nations. And then we got put into this, I guess they called it Task Force Purple or whatever. Yeah, they used to give everybody a collar. That was like their, they did this thing where they said, hey, let's have SEALs and Rangers form a task force together, which I don't know, we did the job. I don't know, if it, like
why it was necessary.
Yeah, why did you do it just to do it? Because everybody's talking about, remember when everybody was talking about, oh, joint this, joint that, joint that?
Yeah.
Like, it was like, okay, well, you could have just done this with, a couple of SEAL troops, or I don't know if it was a manning issue or what, but yeah, so they put us together. We did this task force, SEALs and Rangers. And so we had 2 strike forces. You had a Ranger platoon and a SEAL platoon on each.
Were there EOD guys? Because Navy EOD deploys with Rangers as well.
At the time, no, that wasn't the common practice.
Okay.
Right. So Rangers didn't really have EOD. They didn't care about EOD. They're like, whatever, we don't need you guys. But the SEALs were like,
everybody says that.
These guys are with us. They're coming with us.
Yeah.
So we became minimum force. And a lot of that came from like the higher tier levels where these guys were like, yes, EOD is also always men force for us. Like, no matter what, we're going to have an EOD guy with us because of where we're at and what we're doing. So, did that. Came back from deployment. About 6 months later, the command, the head shed deployed. We were on an off schedule because we were supporting the SEAL teams. So we were back working in the readiness and training shack and just working we were part of the stay-at-home team. And we're working with some of the other platoons that are supporting the other SEAL teams.
This is what now, 2008, 2009?
2008, right?
Okay.
So then 6 months after we get back, the senior enlisted guy there, Eric Brower.
Yeah.
He was the training master chief. He comes in and says, hey, we need one of you guys to deploy with SEAL Team 4 in 6 weeks. And so all the guys there looked at me and they're like, well, I hope you're ready, because I was the only guy who wasn't married and didn't have kids. So like, well, I guess I'll go take my dog back to my mom's in West Virginia and I'll go get all my shots and get ready. And it was funny because Scott got mad about that. He goes, well, wait, why is everybody assuming it's going to be him? And somebody's like, yeah, because he's not married and doesn't have kids, Scott. And while he was going on that deployment that we were, in Baghdad, he was in I want to say Haditha or something. He was out west.
Okay.
But his son was born.
Yeah. Okay. Cole, right?
Yep, Cole. So Scott and I, when we were preparing for our senior board together, I remember that we were sitting there at his house. It was like a month of us just studying all the time. We drank, I don't know how many pots of coffee. But I remember us sitting.
Dude, we used to drink beer when we studied.
Well, we drank beer afterwards,
okay.
Right? So then to catch the effects of the coffee. But yeah, it was funny because I would go to his house some days and we'd be sitting there. He had Cole in his arms while we're studying stuff. Or he would come to my house and we would sit there and study. But I just remember our brains would get fried. Like he would always ride his motorcycle over to my house. And we would just be sitting there after 2 or 3 hours and he'd look at me and be like, you want to go ride bikes? We just hop on our motorcycles and go for a ride for an hour, stop and grab a beer, and then come back and study again. And
yeah,
cool.
Okay, so after you got back from that deployment, you guys did some training and some studying here, but so we're Scott Dayton. This story has a very sad ending. Which I'm sure we're going to get to here real quick. But so what was your next? So let's talk about the deployment that you went on. So did you, in fact, go on that deployment?
Yep, I did.
Okay.
I was attached to SEAL Team 4, attached to a guy you may know, Dan Marshall.
Probably.
He was a 31, I think they called him.
Yeah.
He worked with Rhino.
Okay.
But he was the SEAL Troop senior chief.
Okay.
So I went to Baghdad with them, did another 6 months in the same spot, just with a different SEAL team.
Oh, okay. All right.
Came home, as soon as I got home. I knew I was going to another platoon as soon as I got back. I was going to a regular EOD platoon, like the conventional EOD support is what we called it.
Yeah.
Which I was excited about because somebody who I kind of thought of as a mentor or somebody I looked up to is as far as being an EOD tech, Tyrone Logan had told me, he said, I did my conventional EOD platoon. He's like, I learned more on that than I did anywhere else.
For sure. Yeah.
And that was true for me too. So I came back, I'd already done 2 deployments now, but they were both supporting NSW. That was a challenge for me because now I had to wind it down a little bit. I was like, okay, I don't have to do everything hands-on here. I've got a truck and robot and team members, and so came back, worked. I was also the LPO of that team. So LPO, if you don't, that's like you're the senior sled dog, for lack of a
you're called leading petty officer. So you're the line supervisor for about 6 or 8 dudes, or 8 or 10 dudes, or however the structure is.
And so the guy that I had that was going to be my chief, Devlin Adams, went through EOD school with me, and he knew. He's like, this guy jokes around all the time. Everything's a joke to him. Blah. He's like, I don't want him to be the LPO. I want this other guy to be the LPO. And they said, no, he's going to be your LPO, right? So I'd done a lot of good work on deployments, and I guess some people knew that, and they said, yes, this guy is going to get a shot at LPO. And so I was talking to Mike Riggs, my first team chief. He goes, yeah, I remember that. Said Devlin came up to me and asked me about how you were working, for EOD and being the LPO more specifically. And so Mike told him, I was talking to Mike about this. He goes, I told him that you were either going to be the worst LPO he's ever had or the best. And so later on, when we got through that workup, he had told me this. He goes, man, I was very skeptical about you coming in and being the LPO, but he's like, you absolutely proved me wrong, because I came in there like I was, all right, no joking time, I'm in charge. I'm going to rule this with an iron fist. I'm going to tell people, like, Devlin isn't going to have to tell me what to do. I know what needs to be done, so I'm going to go do it. He's going to have to reel me back. Yeah, right? I'm going to be hard charging. I'm going to take charge. I want to run the day-to-day stuff. I will come to him and say, hey, here's what my plan is for today or this week or whatever. And he told me that, like, later, before we deployed, we're sitting there drinking beers, and I told him, like, here's some things that I think would be good. Ultimately, you can overrule me on this, but I think, we need to make sure we have unit integrity. Like Fridays, as soon as we're done, mandatory, we're all going to go hang out together afterwards and drink a few beers.
Yeah, we used to call that beer under the tree. And
and
we're gonna go to the butt.
Yeah, so we're going to get all this work done. We're going to bust our ass. That it's funny because I had a saying on that team when we went to Fort Pickett to do one of our initial training sessions. We were sitting there talking as a platoon, and I said, hey, what's the stat, or, is this thing done, or is this thing ready? And one of the guys goes, I should. And I was like, I want to tell every one of you guys right now. I didn't say you guys. I said some other choice words, but I was like, that phrase better get out of your vocabulary real quick. I don't want to hear you. If I ask you something, I don't want to hear you say it should or whatever. I either want to hear yes, no, or I don't know, let me find out.
Yeah.
And so, later we'd had beers together, and Devlin's like, you really kind of shocked me. Like, the way it was like because I remember you from school, you were just a goofball, and you never took anything seriously. And he's like, seeing you come in here and run this platoon, like the way you were doing things, like I got to admit, I was wrong.
Yeah. Well, you had 2 war zone deployments under your belt too, so how real it is. And was one of those first 2 deployments where you got your Purple Heart? Were you in firefights?
No, that was, well, I mean, yeah, we did get into some gunfights on those. That's not where I got into that. So.
Okay. All right. So that platoon, you took that platoon on a deployment then?
We crushed it through the workup. Did good on deployment.
Where'd you go?
So we were at this place called Fob Orion. It was about 5 miles south of Balad Air Base.
Oh, wow. Okay.
What they called Mortaritaville because they
Yeah.
So they used to get the indirect fire all the time.
Exactly. All the time. Yeah, I got some time on Balad. And
so I handled all of the indirect fire that fell short of the base south and east of Balad.
okay.
And Devlin had all the stuff that was north and west. And then we had a pretty good stretch of Route Tampa, which all those convoys. We did a lot of good work. We had a lot of calls because a lot of those convoys get attacked by IEDs all the time. So we got called out to go do that a lot. But that was a great deployment. I loved it. It was awesome. A lot of good work.
What year? So when was that?
That would have been 2009.
Okay. Like early 2009? I'm just trying to figure the overlap.
Late 2009.
Okay. All right, so I was long gone by then. I left in January 2009.
Yeah, so that was I was coming back from that second deployment and then too when I was at SEAL Team 4. I think we got back February or March of 2009. Did my workup 6 months, and in October 2009, I was out the door. Like, I literally had several years of my life where I was home for 6 months, gone for 6 months, home for 6 months.
Was that your last deployment, or?
Nope. So I came back from that. I was working in readiness and training department, just training the teams. I don't know what the plans were for me, but I had, if you don't know, readiness and training is you're just like a temp pool. You're just waiting to get thrown onto another team because guys get hurt during workup.
For sure.
So we had, I was sitting in there working. Another one of the NSW teams was getting ready for deployment, they had just finished their EOD portion of the workup. They were getting ready to go over to the SEAL team, SEAL Team 10. Their LPO had gotten hurt. I think he pinched a nerve in his back or something like that on a free fall jump. And so they said, hey, you're post NSW deployer, qualified team leader. These guys are going to Afghanistan. What would that do to you personally if we had to put you on that team? And I was like, well, I guess I'll have to go take my dog back to my mom's house. And
you're still not married at this point.
Yeah.
Are you not seeing your girlfriend at this point?
Nope.
Okay.
Nope. So went and did that. Went and did the workup with those guys. While I was there, I made chief. That whole thing there presented kind of a leadership challenge because the guy above the LPO at the time was not receptive to me just coming under the team. He and I butted heads a couple times, and I think we came to an understanding, and then we became friends.
Yeah. Very common in EOD platoons and EOD detachments, by the way.
It did take me kind of digging in and standing up to him.
For sure.
And, kind of before I, so you had to go out and get that respect, which.
Yeah.
But yeah, went over there, went to SEAL Team 10, did the workup, made chief. And then few months before we deployed, they said, hey, so this deployment, they're reorganizing the force structure, the way that they're deploying guys. So one of the issues that they had was all these special operations teams that are going over there and working with the Afghanis. They said, you guys are only here for a short period of time and then you leave. What's up? Now we have to come in and build new relationships with these new teams. And so they said, okay, we're going to start sending teams over there for longer. A standard soft deployment is 6 months, and they say, well, all these other guys are over here for 12 or 15. It's like, yeah, but you're probably, their deployments are shorter. The soft deployments are shorter, but they're also usually a lot more intense. But they said, okay, we'll keep the teams there a little bit longer. So in order to bridge the gap between the new deployment schedule, they said, hey, SEAL Team 10, you guys, you were supposed to be here for 6 months. You're going to be here for 11 months now doing village stability operations. So that was a new thing where we came in, we lived in the village with the Afghanis. We trained the partner force. We kind of The goal was to establish a certain level of security, because that was a big thing. They were like, yeah, we come into these places, have these shuras, the meetings with the leadership, and then we leave, and then the Taliban comes back in, because they live there. That's their turf. So the thought was, what if we live there too, right? And then, we have somebody who's there to suppress the Taliban. Ultimately, it didn't work. I don't think it worked. I think a lot of us, when we got there and got on the ground and saw how everything worked, we're like, when we talk about, maybe we'll talk about the withdrawal here soon, but it really made me mad when that all happened, when the guys were like, oh, we never saw this coming, because one of the things we always said was, when we were there, this is 2011. We're like, man, 10 minutes after we leave, the Taliban are going to swoop back in and completely take this entire thing over again, which 10 years later, that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, exactly. Wow. I want to take a minute to tell you about my book titled Elevate Your Leadership: How to Develop, Maintain, and Advance Lifelong Leadership. This book is based on my 26 years in U.S. Navy Special Operations and now 13 years in the private sector. Leadership is a perishable skill and a personal brand. In part 1, I guide you through building and applying your personal brand of leadership. Leadership also requires physical energy and mental clarity. In part 2, I go over the 6 key components of health and wellness and how you can apply these components every single day to become a great leader. This book is also breathable. What does that mean? It's 170 pages, 12-point font, with charts and graphs and pictures to break up the monotony of reading page after page. Finally, this book is available on Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, and of course, RobertPizzini.com. Folks, I want to take a minute and talk about Breeden Construction. Breeden Construction built iFly Virginia Beach 10 years ago, and our building is solid. Why? Building a standard. Our standard is excellence. Visionary thinking, innovative design, dynamic solutions, and transformative growth. While others may see lofty ideals, we see the very foundation needed to construct a better future. This isn't just a promise we make to you, it's the standard we uphold. This is Breeden Construction. Learn more at breedenconstruction.com. Headquartered in Virginia with offices throughout Virginia and North Carolina, you can contact Breeden Construction directly at area code 804-364-4600. Breeden Construction, a national general contractor. Okay, so this is your third deployment now? You did
Fourth.
It's your fourth deployment. That's right. And but with the SEAL team again.
Yep.
Okay.
So
all right. So uneventful other than all that? Or?
No, very eventful. That the VSO was a very dangerous mission. That's without a doubt, like
VSO,
Village Stability Operations,
okay.
where we go live in the village with the people. Like from an EOD perspective, that's literally probably the most dangerous job that EOD has ever done.
For sure.
Like even compared to like doing some of the cool guy stuff that some of the other, because you're out there doing what a conventional EOD team does without all the conventional EOD team's gear. Right. So we're living in the village, tons of IEDs all over the place. We were in Helmand province, that's kind of a proving ground for IED tactics. Like I was reading reports every day of these Marines in Sangin. They're like losing one or both of their legs. And that was literally probably the most dangerous place. Like the Helmand River Valley was bad. There's a lot of bad places in Afghanistan. Everybody's like, well, that was the worst place. Was it the worst place? So I try to not say this was the worst place or that was the worst place. They were all really bad. And a lot of guys were getting really messed up, especially with IEDs over there.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So how did that deployment end?
Well, we did our 11 months. We got out of there. That was the deployment where I got my Purple Heart, though, which is, I'll tell you the story. It was pretty uneventful. I had been up all night in one of the towers. We had these little machine gun towers on top of the mud hut that we lived. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to go get some shut-eye because I was up doing watch. I go to lay down on my cot. And we had our cots out in this courtyard. We had like tarps and stuff over top of us to block the sun. but there was a hole in the tarp and the sun was shining like right on my face as I'm trying to take a nap. So I'm like, all right, I got to get up and go sit inside one of the huts in a chair and try to sleep. And that saved my life, because probably 30 or 45 minutes later, when we established our VSO site, we literally got into 4, 5, 6 gunfights a day. Just people attacking the site. We'd go out, respond. The guys are gone by then, so we're trying to do all these different things to catch guys that are attacking us. And yeah, I mean, you're literally like months and months and months of getting in 4 or 5 gunfights a day. Found a lot of IEDs out there. But I was just sitting in a chair taking a nap. Well, I tell people that, they're like, what? You didn't get it in like a... They're terrible shots with rifles, but what they were really good with was those underbarrel grenade launchers, like our M203. I think they call it the UGL 37. They were pretty good with that. I had
was it 40 millimeter?
It was 37 millimeter.
Okay, all right.
But I'd had a couple of close calls where I'd almost gotten tagged a few times with one of those. One, we had this little irrigation ditch next to our VSO site. We set it up to where we could take baths out there. We had a little thing where we were trying to clean the water as best we could and use that for taking baths. And I had one land about 20 feet from me. Didn't get me.
But it detonated?
Yep.
Yeah.
They were pretty good with those. And so I was sitting inside this little room in a chair. There was a metal door right here, and the thing landed right between mine and the dog handler's cots. The grenade that got me. Literally. So that was a pretty abrupt wake up from a nap. And I felt like I'd gotten punched in the chest, and I looked down and just blood starts streaming down my chest. And, so I was like, oh, so I walk outside, I'm all groggy, I'm holding my chest, and I'm like, hey, that grenade got me, and it was just blood coming every, and there was 5 or 6 other guys that were like, yeah, it got us too. And so I just went in there, started packing it, all still tired and groggy, and the medic comes over and rips it all out and is like, I gotta look at this. He was worried because of where it was on my chest, that it might have gone into my chest cavity. So they medevaced me, went to the hospital there at Bastion, which is on Camp Leatherneck. They did surgery. So it was fun. I got mad because I was wounded up here on my shoulder. As soon as I get there, another story on that. It was a British medevac helo that came and got us. It was a 47, because it was like 5 of us that got medevaced. We all got, and I was dirty. I hadn't seen, we'd been out there in the village for months, and the Brits, man, I'll tell you what, they have some really good helicopter pilots.
Okay.
This guy basically came in with a 47 head on, and then he did this like Tokyo drift thing where he just swung the back end around and set it down, 50 yards from us. So I ran out there. I was carrying my kit and my helmet, and I just kind of ran out there and sat down in the helo. And I remember this cute old British medic came up and started talking, and I was just sitting there like, hey, what's up? I usually put an IV in. I hate getting needles in my arm, so I'm just like trying to pretend like it's not bothering me.
Yeah.
I don't mind a lot of stuff, but the needle going into your skin, I'm just like, ugh. And this doc comes up and he holds this little syringe up and it says ketamine. And I was like, oh yeah, I've heard about this before. So he gave me some ketamine and I just blasted off into outer space. Like I came back to as the helo landed at Bastion and they were taking me off. And I got mad because they took me in. I don't know if they just didn't tell him that they gave me ketamine or whatever, but they were like, well, he's unconscious. Let's cut all of his clothes off. And I was mad.
They were triaging like you just came.
So at the big base where we were based out of, we had this Afghani there who was like a really good tailor. He would do your laundry we paid him to do laundry, and we employed a lot of people. And he had taken a pair of pants that I liked and turned them into shorts for me, like cargo shorts.
Yeah. I did the same thing in Iraq.
And so I got really mad because that's what I was wearing. I had my shorts, my boots, and then a t-shirt. And they cut those shorts. This is my favorite pair of shorts. They just cut them off. And I'm in there like, don't. And this was the first time I'd been in air conditioning in months. And we all know what happens to us guys when you get cold. And so I was like, hey, don't laugh at, certain things that'll happen. It's cold in here. And they started laughing, and
they probably hear that every dude that comes in.
So they said, hey, we x-rayed your shoulder. There's a bunch of frag in there. We're going to put you in, we're going to go to surgery and get that out. One of the other SEALs who had gotten wounded too, was one of the officers. We called him, I don't know if he's still I won't say his name, but he was funny. He was one of the first Coast Guard guys to go through BUDS. And he was the assistant officer in charge but he and I got medevac together. We got in trouble in the hospital because it was like a British field hospital.
Uh-huh.
So we're walking around with our IV things in the hospital. We got out of our beds and we're walking around just, hello, good. And one of the security guys came up and was like, yeah, we're going to strap you down to your beds if you don't get back in there. And went and did our surgery, went to this outpatient thing because they were like, your guys' wounds are really deep and we're worried if we sewed you up right now that it would get infected. Okay. So we're going to send you to this little the Navy had this little building where they did like outpatient care.
Mm-hmm.
And they dressed our wounds every day, put clean dressings in there, checked to make sure it was that was terrible.
Mm-hmm.
They gave us Percocets whenever they would do that, and I hate any kind of opioids. I just don't, it makes me sick. So I'd go take my Percocet nap after they would change that dressing twice a day. But yeah, that healed up, went back out there. 2 weeks later, was back out,
Cool. All right. So that was deployment number 4.
Yep.
Holy cow. Any after that?
Yeah. So I did a couple of deployments. That's when I went to Florida. But
okay.
After that, I was there and I was getting ready. They were saying, hey, you're up for orders. The detailer says you have to go to shore duty. I had been on sea duty for 12 years.
Wow. Holy cow.
So they were like, you have to go to shore duty. And my op tempo was way in the...
in the red.
But so that deployment, I got wounded. And then a couple weeks later, our LPO, Bobby Wood, he had gotten wounded, lost most of his right hand.
Mm.
And then a couple weeks after that, our officer in charge, Brad Snyder, got wounded and he got blinded.
Yeah.
Which that's a great story too.
It is. And so Brad wrote a book about it. So Brad Snyder was the officer in charge of an EOD platoon. And his platoon came to the training unit when I was on staff at the training unit there.
See, I got to that team after they finished the training unit.
Okay. So Brad's book is called Fire in My Eyes. He's a Paralympic gold medalist in swimming. Exactly 1 year after, they call it a live day, 1 year after he was seriously wounded by an IED, he won Paralympic gold, and I believe it was in the United Kingdom.
Yep.
Yeah, and so the book is called Fire in My Eyes. It's an incredible book. We need to pick up the Scott Dayton thread. So you got back from this deployment.
Mm-hmm.
Where was Scott at this time? What's going on?
So Scott had, I told you I went out there with SEAL Team 4.
Mm-hmm.
Well, during that time, Scott had got put on the platoon behind that, the SEAL Team 10 one.
Okay.
That came and relieved us. So I actually turned over with him off my second deployment in Iraq. He came back, did a couple of like individual augment things to like Afghanistan. And then he came back and went to the training unit where I went as well. I went over there. He worked in Chem Bio. I worked in nukes.
Okay.
And then he finished his time there, went to Mobile Unit 2, doing the Crisis Response Force mission.
CRF.
Yep. And then I had gone to Mobile Unit 6 and done the Crisis Response Force mission there. So, they did the workup, did one deployment. I think he was working with 5th Group. I was attached to 7th Group.
So that's 5th and 7th Special Forces Group. Those are Army Green Beret groups, basically. And we'll talk a little bit about this Las Vegas thing. But during my Iraqi deployment, I was assigned to a 10th Group, Special Forces team, and then a lot of time in Asia with 1st Group. But Navy EOD integrates heavily with or at that time we did anyway, with Army Special Operating Forces.
Yep. So, to get into the Scott Dayton thing, we were on the road show, preparing, just going through the national labs to do all the counter WMD stuff. Scott was getting ready to roll out on his second deployment there, and I walked out of the armory and I saw him in the parking lot and, chatted with him, and I said, hey, yeah, well, I know you guys are leaving here in a couple of weeks. We're getting ready to leave too. So I'll see you when you get back. We'll go drink some cold beers together. That was his, let's go drink some cold beers. Right. One thing about me and him, when we were on a team together, we used to argue like little brothers did all the time. Some of the things you would hear us say to each other, you would never guess that we were as good of friends as we were.
Yeah. Now, again, that's not unusual for the dynamic within EOD teams. Not unusual at all.
But at the end of the day, we were always sitting there drinking a beer together. And so I said, when you get back, we'll drink some cold beers together. And
now, what year is this?
2016.
Okay. All right. So fast forward 2016.
Yep. So here I am. It's Thanksgiving 2016. I'm at my mother-in-law's. I was mad at both of my kids because they were both acting like little brats at the time, and so they didn't want anything to do with me. And we're sitting on the back porch just having some drinks after dinner. My dad had come up, my wife, her brother and his wife were there.
Thanksgiving Day 2016. What city?
Suffolk.
Oh, okay. You're in Virginia.
Yeah.
Okay.
So her parents moved down to Suffolk there in 2016. Sitting there on the back porch, and my phone just starts blowing up. I started getting all these text messages from people. I had a few people call me, and they said, hey, I didn't know if you had heard about Scott. It was like, I wanted to call because I knew you guys were close. And I said, what? And he said, yeah, he got blown up. And I was like, is he okay? And they said, no, he's gone. And I just... I dropped my phone and I started bawling. Like, they're all sitting there having a good time talking about stuff. And I'm like, I'm having a hard time breathing, and I just start, and they're like, are you okay? Or what's wrong? And I couldn't tell them. I was just, so here I am like, my wife was kind of like, what's going on? I don't know. What's up with him? Like, I couldn't speak. And finally, after about 5 minutes, sorry if I started teared up a little bit.
It's all right, man.
But yeah, I was able to finally tell them about it. And of course, the first person I called after that was, I called, Mike Riggs, and, cause he was our team chief, and, he was Scott's team leader on that deployment. And I told him, and I just, the whole rest of the night was just kind of, so I think about that now every Thanksgiving, when I'm sitting outside drinking some whiskey, frying a turkey, I, think about him.
Thanksgiving Day 2016.
Yeah.
KIA in Syria.
Yep.
IED.
Yep. And, there hasn't been a day that's gone by ever since then where I haven't thought about him at least once a day. In fact, part of that's probably because right over my desk, I have a picture of him just framed like right there.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're going to see a statue there. We call that November 1. And that statue is based on the likeness of Scott Dayton. And Scott Dayton's death had a lot to do with the formation of something called the Navy Special Operations Foundation. Joe Cockrell, Harry Bassnight, a couple of EOD techs who were also very, very close with Scott. They wanted to do something to memorialize Scott. And so I think it was 2017 or 18 when we did the 5K out of what was then called Green Flash Brewery. Were you there for that?
I can't remember.
Okay.
No, I don't think actually, I was. I was there for it.
Okay. So these fellas, these teammates, Joe and Harry, they came to me because I'm, 2 years into iFly at this point, and they're like, hey, people in the city, we want to have this huge memorial run for Scott. Here's where we want to do it. We need some help getting this thing approved. And so we were able to get this thing put together. It was a 5K in memory of Scott. It was designed primarily to raise funds for his family, for Kristen and Cole. And it was so successful that that really Joe and Harry at that point, they thought we need to create a foundation that not only does this for Scott, but does it for everybody else and really makes a difference. And so the Navy Special Operations Foundation was born really based off of this support for Scott Dayton's family initially. And so there's been a run of 5K every year to memorialize it. There's been an FA-18 flyover, missing man formation, which that requires the highest level of approval to do. And I think they did that the first and the second year for in memoriam of Scott Dayton. Scott's son Cole was a member with our youth league for a long time. Obviously, everybody does what they can to help this young man be successful, and so we donated youth league for probably 3 or 4 years. And what was cool is when he was here flying, or especially during the showcase at the end of 12 weeks, all the kids do a showcase for their parents. All the EOD brothers that showed up to watch Scott Dayton's son Cole fly was moving, to say the least. So okay, you good?
Yeah.
Keep going?
Yeah.
All right. So you're getting at the end of your career. I want to transition now. Is there anything career-wise that we didn't talk about that you wouldn't have hit?
No, I mean, that, it's kind of a natural progression there, because that was really the tipping point for me for the next phase of my career. And, everybody who knew Scott, that was a huge impact on people like that. He was a guy that a lot of people knew and loved. I remember Rick Hofer said it best. He said, hey, we always say we have strong divers and smart divers. And he said, Scott was a social diver. Like he, if you knew him very well, that was one of the things that he loved most about the EOD community was brotherhood.
For sure.
And that's what kind of got the wheel spinning in my head of thinking about that. And like, what's something where I could kind of do something to keep that spirit alive, right? And I felt like, it would be easier to do something on the outside than the inside, because now nobody has control over me and tells me you can't do this or can't
That's
do
right.
that.
Boy, oh boy, do I get that. Let me tell you.
And again, too, that's my personality. Is just, people are like, how would you describe your personality? I always say, like that guy in the movie that presses the big red button that says "Do not push." Like, that's me. I don't know why that's me. It's just, I'm like, if somebody's like, don't push that, I'm like, that button's getting pushed. I don't care what it does now. The fact that you told me don't push it, it's just, I don't know. That's just the best way I can describe my personality, right? But I thought, well, I'm getting older. My last deployment down there to 7th Group, here I was 36 years old, trying to keep up with these 24-year-old Green Berets. Like,
yeah, right.
I could make myself keep up with them for a couple hours, but the real thing is, all of us who got older knows, like, the real deciding factor is the next day when they can go out and do it again, and you're like, ugh,
I need some recovery time.
Yeah, right. So I was like, okay, I can't do this. This is what I love to do. If I'm going to go sit behind a desk, I'm going to do it on my own terms. And so I made the decision to retire about 14 months before I actually did.
Okay.
And yeah, so that's kind of what led to me getting out. I retired a week before my 38th birthday, and got into the job I'm in now, working in financial services and trying to, focus on, like, what are some problems that guys like me who are retiring out of the military have, like, being somebody who can help them solve those problems, and not being a scumbag too, because that's, there's a lot of apprehension when talking to people who work in, especially life insurance, investments. Everybody's knows that they need to do this stuff. It's just, they're very apprehensive about working with people because there's just this negative connotation about working with these guys.
No, dude, especially when you own a business. I mean, I get contacted by financial advisors every single day almost, and through LinkedIn and, the socials and insurance people in particular, man, you can never have enough insurance, according to any insurance salesperson. There's always more. You can always have a bigger policy. And, I have this dream or this fantasy of no insurance, which people also call self-insurance.
Yeah, I was just about to say that.
Yeah, but insurance is becoming cost prohibitive. And, you're better off self-insuring, which means taking the risk on your own. And I'm not advising that or recommending that. I'm just saying that economic circumstances are making good people make bad decisions. And so hopefully in your new role, you're helping people with that.
Yeah. I get, I kind of, and here's the thing, I remember hearing this, an early mentor of mine told me this. He said, hey, there are honest insurance agents and then there are successful insurance agents. So I was like, or good insurance, whatever you want to call them. And, I just kind of didn't like it. Again, this guy's telling me to press this button or don't press that button. Right. And I'm like, why? And so I'm kind of working on that. Like, why do you have to be this certain way to be successful doing this?
Yeah.
I won't say that you have to be like that, but it takes longer to get to where you want to go if you're trying to do it that way. So yeah, I haven't broken any records or anything like that, but I'm also honest with people. I try to not, hey, let's look at this. I've kind of learned the techniques and stuff, evaluating like, what do you need?
Yeah. You had a great post this morning on LinkedIn.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So because I think that post really spells out the things that you look at for service members, particularly people transitioning. Can you just kind of dive into that a little bit?
I'm trying to remember what was the post. It was,
you're talking about how much you talked about disability, but you talked about how much money over time, like if you live to be 85 years old.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I think a big thing about finance, it's personal finance is it's one of the things that people just don't know. We all know, like, yes, we need education on this stuff and we never get it. A lot of times what we get while we're in the Navy, we have like the person who went to the 2-week course say this.
And we got a 45-minute GMT, a 45-minute general military.
Everybody's paying attention to
That's
it.
right.
So that's something that I've been trying to crack the code on is as somebody who's been formally educated in financial planning and things like that, trying to take that and translate. That was one thing I think I was really good at. When I was a nukes instructor, I did get a lot of good feedback from people saying like, hey, I like Chief Maxwell's class on this or that. He was able, if I can take nuclear physics and break that down into an entertaining and easy to understand class that people, it resonates with people and they remember things. Why can't I do that with personal finance? So
damn good question.
That's what I've been trying to do. And I'm trying to be something else I talk about in another post that's coming up. I try to be authentic. I don't try to, people are like, well, I don't wear a suit and tie. I don't drive a Porsche. I wear PT gear and Crocs at home. And I, do all my
stuff. It used to be Tevas, man. We used to wear Tevas. Now people are wearing Crocs.
It's funny. My obsession with Crocs, I came in Afghanistan. I was like, oh, wow, these are really convenient and comfortable. And,
can you run and gun in them?
Yeah. I mean, when we patrolled around, you just got to put the little foot strap down.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's funny at nighttime in Afghanistan, that village we lived in, sometimes we would go out at night, and, just, I'm wearing t-shirt, shorts, Crocs, and I got my kit on them. And people were like, what if you step on an IED? I'm like, dude, if I step on an IED, a boot's not going to.
It doesn't make a difference. Right? Yeah.
These are some nice boots. I don't want to damage.
You'll save the nice boot.
Right?
Yeah.
Crocs are like $10. But, yeah, it's just being authentic and being factual. So, I'm trying to teach people to there's a lot of personalities out there in the personal finance space that I think are going to, in the long run, do more damage than good. Like the Dave Ramsey, Susie Orsman, those types of people who what people don't understand is like those people are content creators, they're marketers and advertisers. They're not like actual personal finance guys. Like what they do is they go out and get these huge audiences because they answer a lot of questions for people. They make you feel good. They're very broad base and very little depth to what they're saying. I'm trying to kind of be the opposite of that and say, what are specific issues and, go a little deeper into that. So it's more like trying to teach people how to think versus what to think about these things and make well-informed decisions. And, if that costs me a sale, I don't care. Yeah. Like I've gotten very good at living within my means. I make enough to take care of myself. My wife does okay too. So it doesn't bother me that I'm not out there like bringing in, $1 million every year. I just, I get to do what I want to do with integrity and
for sure.
And once in a while when people are like, hey man, thanks, I really appreciate that. I'm like, hey, that's all I need, right? I can still go out and go hike whenever I want. Or
I know you spent a lot of time talking about the SGLI and or the
survivor benefit.
This SBP, survivor benefit plan. And can you just in a nutshell, explain the pros and cons and how you work with clients regarding that?
Yeah. So really, I mean, those are the two big questions that I answer most of the time, right? I think it's also important from a business perspective to know like, hey, what specifically do you want to do? So what we do mostly, hey, is the survivor benefit plan a good deal for me, right? And if it is.
And just real quick for listeners, so survivor benefit plan, when you retire from active duty, you can subscribe or sign up for something called SBP or survivor benefit plan. And go ahead and just give us the basics.
So it's actually a little different than that.
Okay.
You're automatically enrolled in it.
That's right.
You have to opt out of it.
That's
so
right.
Basically
Your
what
wife
it is.
has to agree to opt out of it.
There's something in Title 10 of the U.S. Code. I forget specifically which section and everything, but basically because you have a pension, I can't remember the name of the actual law or whatever, but essentially the military survivor benefit plan, if you pass away, your spouse gets 55% of either the full amount of your pension or whatever base amount you select. So like if your pension's $3,000 a month, you pass away, your wife's going to get a little over $1,500 a month. That's pre-tax, obviously. So they say it's 55%. It's actually closer to 40 to 45% after tax.
Right.
But that is adjusted for inflation every year. It continues for life under certain circumstances. So a lot of financial planning type people will look at that and they'll say, oh, okay, that's a good thing. Like you can do this and then I've done my job. Part of the problem is if you're just paying somebody for advice and they have no skin in the game and helping you understand everything else that's out there, they're just going to look at that and say, oh, okay, I can meet my fiduciary standards by just telling you to meet that, right? Mm-hmm. Some of the downfalls of survivor benefit plan, well, it's not free. You pay for it. You pay 6.5% of your pension for a minimum of 360 months. So if you're an E9,
30 years.
At 30 years, you're going to pay about $200,000 in premiums in this thing. If you're an 06 at 30 years, you're going to pay $330,000 on those things. There's some other issues with it aside from that it's only 55% of the pension pre-tax, 40 to 45% after tax. There's some beneficiary issues with it too. Your kids can only be beneficiaries until the age of 18 or 22 if they're in college. Your spouse, if they start collecting benefits before the age of 55 and they get remarried, the benefit goes away. Now, if they get divorced or whatever, they can start it again. But, so now you get into some of the other issues. Hey, if your wife predeceases you or your husband, like your spouse predeceases you, and you've paid into this thing for 30 years, that's gone. Right? You don't get a refund for it.
Yeah.
If they predecease you and then your kids are too old, again, too, it's gone.
Yeah.
If you both live to be 85 years old, then what did you pay into it for? Or if something happens to you, your spouse starts collecting the benefit and then they pass away, there's no legacy for your kids.
Yeah, right.
So you can see there's some inherent issues there that, in comparison to private sector alternatives, i.e. life insurance, may or may not be the best deal for you. So the problem is when you're doing the class, and you probably had the class in TAP too, they say, yeah, it's great. It protects you financially. Like the way that it's presented, it's like it's the best thing ever.
It is definitely presented that way.
Whereas, it's like, well, when you sit down and do a deep dive on this and compare it to some of the alternatives, maybe it's not as good of a deal as you were initially led to believe. And I think part of the problem is they don't put a lot of credence on the good things about the alternatives, whereas it's 100% of whatever the amount is, tax-free lump sum versus taxable monthly payments.
Mm-hmm.
You can change your beneficiary, depending on which product you use, you can protect for different amounts of time. You can protect it for your entire life. You can, if you're using like a permanent life insurance policy, which a lot of people hear whole life, index universal life, those are permanent life insurance policies. You can use that to build an asset.
Is the cost roughly the same? So
that's a good question, because one of the things that we look at when we're doing a comparison is I try to show them, like, here's what you pay into SVP. Here's what you would pay into SVP over 30 years. Here's what it would look like for you.
Yeah.
When I'm trying to show somebody a comparison, I use the same amount. Like, say, hey, let's take that same amount that you would have paid into SVP and put that into this and show you the difference in the two.
What does that look like after 10 years or 15 years?
So you have,
SVP after 15 years, you got nothing.
Yeah.
If you bought into a whole life thing after 10 years, what does that look like?
So, you can build equity into it.
Death benefit is
death benefit
equal or better.
You can get more. That's the great thing, is like you can design it however you want, right? So some people do SBP and then they still want life insurance, which, okay, that's a viable strategy.
Yeah.
But just relying on SBP by yourself is not.
So SBP, they changed rules recently. Is it open enrollment and disenrollment, open and continuous?
So you're talking about the open season?
Yeah.
So they had the open season in 2023. Essentially what happens is whenever there's a law changing that affects SBP, what they'll do is they'll have these open seasons. Normally during the open seasons, it will allow you to enroll in SBP. You have to make all your premiums up. 2023 was unique in that it was the first time where they would let you enroll or opt out,
right,
without
remember that
any kind of, so there's some other things with SBP. You can opt out of it. Like if you don't opt out of it at retirement, there's an opt-out window between 25 and 36 months after you retire. You can opt out. Again, it requires your spouse's concurrence.
Yeah.
If you have a life-changing event like a divorce or something like that, or your spouse passes away, you can opt out. You don't get any premiums back.
Yeah,
so,
right. On 23, that was just this unique thing. So is that window closed now?
It is.
So you can't. So when would the next opt-out opportunity be? Like if I wanted to convert my survivor benefit plan payment to a whole life payment, how difficult is that to do?
So you would have to either wait for another open season. I'll tell you, the reason they had that open season in 2023 was because they changed the law. There used to be an offset between the survivor benefit plan and what's another thing that you get from the VA called dependency indemnity compensation, which is basically if your death occurs as a result of something that you were rated for by the VA and service connected, it's a payment that your spouse gets. There used to be an offset between the DIC and the SBP. They got rid of that offset. And so because of that, they said, hey, under these new circumstances, somebody may want to get into survivor benefit plan now. So we're going to have this open season. Additionally, they changed the law, like now you can opt out. That was the first time they'd ever done that. The open seasons don't happen that often. I think the last one they had was like 2005 or something like that. So that's an important distinction. Like if you don't have a qualifying event, you're going to have to wait for another open season.
Which may never happen.
Yeah, it may not happen in our lifetime.
Yeah.
I'm sure it'll happen again eventually at some point. But yeah, so I think the whole point that I'm getting at here is I'm working on creating a ton of content to give people a better perspective on making the decision. If you want to keep SVP, that's great. Just understand there's a trade-off there. If you're just doing that, there's a gap in protection, right? If you want to do life insurance, that's great. I even go into like, hey, me as a professional, here's how I look at this. Now I'm trying to give you like some insight into how I look at this so you can look at it like that. Because think about it. If you go to a mechanic, right? If you're not a car guy and you go to a mechanic, you have to take the car guy's word for it.
Yeah.
Right? So you're, a lot of times you're just going to go with whatever they tell you to do. Well, what if you did know a little bit about cars? What if somebody's trying to tell you this, and this, and you're like, no. So I'm trying to just kind of make somebody a little bit, because believe it or not, when it comes to financial services, having an educated client works in your favor.
For sure.
Because they know what you want. That's what happens, I think, a lot of times is the advisor or whoever, the agent, whatever is talking to them, they're coming and looking at it from this perspective, and the client is looking at it from this. Did you ever see that? There's like a diagram where they have two lights shining on a cylinder, and depending on which way you're looking at it, one shadow looks like a square and the other looks like a circle.
Okay.
Right? So what you're trying to do is be able to show them like, hey, here's why I'm telling you the things that I'm telling you, right? I'm looking at this, I'm seeing a square. You're looking at it, you're seeing a circle. So I think...
And they're both right.
Yeah, they're both right? So you're trying to like say, hey, how do we kind of come together so we're seeing the same shape and get on the same page? And, I think part of that too is like that professional that you're working with has to have the integrity to say, hey, I need to look at like, what is it that they want? If what they want isn't matching up with what I'm recommending, it's either a lack of understanding, a lack of education. So maybe they need some education on here's why I say things this way, or maybe it's like hey, they don't want to know. This is just what they want, right? Their heels are dug in. So the best thing you can do is say, okay, I just want you to understand. Here's what you're sacrificing by doing this. Like I'm not trying to recommend stuff because I want to make more money. Yes, you do make more money on it, but I guess like the thing there is the value there.
Yeah, and that's you're definitely looking out for your client's best interest.
Yeah. So that's another thing that I think a lot of people look at where they make a mistake is they buy things based on their cost instead of their value.
Yeah.
And so that's what I try to do is like, hey, here's the value of this, right? When I'm talking to you about this, I'm talking at it from a perspective of value. You're looking at it from a perspective of cost.
Okay.
Right. Okay. But if, some people, they're like, hey, this is what I want. Okay. That's fine. I'm more than happy to help you with that.
Yeah. That's kind of the way I am, I think.
Some people are like, when they're receptive to that, I think as they learn more, your perspective shifts.
It does. My advisor, my financial advisor, been working with him for 6 months before I signed with him.
Yeah.
And I kind of thought he would walk away at some point and say, man, this Pizzini is just too freaking difficult, man. He's, he won't commit and he's not 100% believing what we're telling him. But it just took me a while to, I got to think about stuff. I got to do a little research on my own. I have to discuss things with my wife, and bring her into the discussions. And so it's a process, it's definitely a process.
We kind of keep track of some of this stuff. The average person that actually hits me up because they want to do life insurance or investments or whatever, I always ask them this, how long have you been following me? They say probably about 6 to 8 months before I reached out.
Good. Very nice.
That's why I love creating content because these people see that. And that's why I love video content because then people get to see, oh, that's Bob, that's Trevor. That's who they like. Yeah. And then you make that connection with them. They've seen what you said. You get a lot of those barriers out of the way because they already kind of know like, hey, here's who I am. Here's what I want. That's part of being authentic, right? Showing them, hey, here's who I really am. Because now a lot of the people that come and say, hey, I want to work with you, they already know a lot of like what I believe. Who
They
I
vetted
am.
you.
Yeah, right. So it makes those conversations, which I love that. If somebody, I've had people before where I just, I've fired clients, whatever, prospects, whatever,
Sure.
because they're just, it's not productive for either of us.
Yeah.
To have this constant going back and forth. They don't trust me. I'm like, hey, that's fine. If you don't trust me, go talk to that guy that wears a suit to work every day and drives a Porsche.
Yeah.
Because it seems like we're not a good fit for each other right now. Like, I understand you have some apprehension. Here's some things. Like, come back to me if you really want to kind of learn more. But, I've had people, they keep coming back, and all they want to do is argue with me. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to discontinue this because it's not worth my time.
No, I totally hear you, man. In my leadership consulting and stuff like that, I had a fairly large company, and they were vetting me, and it's like meeting 2 or meeting 3, and they bring in the head of HR, and this guy just wants to beat me up, and I was like, I'm not interested in pursuing this any further.
Yeah. I think that's a huge thing, a big thing for me in my personal progression. I was like, hey, I don't want to work with people who aren't ideal clients for me.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to work with everybody. I know specifically who I want to work with and what I want to help them with.
Well, 3 criteria, right? For me, 3 criteria. 1, got to make money. 2, it's got to be fun. I got to enjoy being around the people and sharing that experience. And 3 is I love to learn new things.
Yep.
So if those 3 criteria are met, we're going to have a great relationship. So, Trevor, regarding I want to shift gears because we had a couple IED incidents here, one in New Orleans and one in Las Vegas, and you mentioned earlier you saw me on Fox News. Whenever there's an explosive or an IED incident or a terrorism related incident. Or something in the water, the bridge collapse, the Francis Scott Key Bridge, or the Chinese balloon that got shot down, and the mini sub that got lost on the Titanic. Fox gets a hold of me to comment on those things because of my military subject matter expertise, and so I did a thing on the Las Vegas. Vehicle-borne, it's called a VBID, a vehicle-borne IED is the way we classify that. But I did a little piece on Fox about it, and a lot of commentary, a lot of discussion. This is like raw because you and I haven't discussed this before, but based on what you've seen and what you know of it, what are your thoughts or observations on the Las Vegas thing?
So the Cybertruck thing, that was not, like, I even said that to my wife. I was like, that's not really a big explosion. And somebody was like, well, Cybertruck's really sturdy. I was like, I don't care how sturdy it is. I've blown up a lot of vehicles, and that Cybertruck, like, if you use like actual C4 TNT,
high explosive, real,
going to completely obliterate.
Exactly.
them,
Real.
right?
That's exactly what I said.
Like, I've seen tanks get blown up before, and guess what? Like,
yeah.
Even that tank, I promise you that a Cybertruck is not as tough as a tank. Like, it's not.
Yeah,
it's not pretty. Like, I've seen the inside of an armored personnel carrier that got hit.
For sure. I've saw dozens of them in Iraq.
Yeah, like, it is not. When I think explosion, like big explosion, I think like, these 26-ton trucks that get flipped over and by hundreds of that. To me, and I think because one of the first things I noticed was like, it looks like fireworks coming out of the back of that thing.
For sure. Yeah.
Right. So that to me, and having gone to Quantico a couple of times and doing like post-blast courses with the FBI.
I've been to FBI post-blast, LVB, so VBID, vehicle-borne IED, which is what we saw in Las Vegas. There's another category, like think Oklahoma City, Timothy McVeigh. That's called a LVBID, or large vehicle-borne IED, 2 different categories.
That one, there was some technical proficiency there in the Oklahoma City one because of the way that the barrels were lined up. The Oklahoma
for sure.
City one.
Yeah, no, McVeigh and Nichols, they experimented.
Yeah.
And he buffered.
Yeah.
Right, so there was total technical proficiency, and I'd love to geek out on that, man, because without those guys being scientists, McVeigh especially did a lot of research he was highly successful in that attack. He brought that building down, basically.
I watched some my wife and I were watching some show last night, and she hates watching some of these shows with me, especially where there's a bomb in there, because I'm like, oh, that's crap. Like I'd have that thing done in like 30 seconds, right?
I wouldn't have cut that wire.
Yeah, and I was like, this is so dumb. Like they go so over the top with this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
She's like, oh my God, would you stop, please? Can we just fast forward past this part?
Yeah, there was some chat, that this Green Beret, and the fact that this guy was a Green Beret, interesting, and the fact that he assembles a very crude, basic device that was low order, so a high order detonation it's called velocity of detonation, right? So as the heat wave or the pressure wave travels through that material that explodes, if it travels at the speed of sound or greater, that's a high order detonation. And high explosives create that and would have ripped that vehicle apart. And like you said, even a small quantity, a quarter pound, small quantity would have ripped that vehicle to shreds.
I remember being at Fort Pickett, and we put 2 blocks of C4 under a van on one of the ranges. Yeah, there was like nothing left of that van.
Yeah. Ambulance. We in Thailand, we did basically an LV bid attack with an ambulance, and the thing was totally destroyed. But, I drive an EV. I drive a Ford F-150 EV. And so there's chat saying that maybe this guy was trying to get the battery to detonate, which could be true in his thought process, but certainly not effective in execution.
So that's the difference between detonate and deflagrate.
Yeah.
Right? So exploding versus burning.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
That's what lithium does, is it burns.
Yeah, exactly. And so lithium ion, I'm pretty sure those are lithium ion batteries. There's a new one called NCP.
It's like nickel, cadmium.
Yeah, nickel, cadmium. I forget the third element, but at any rate, if this guy was trying to penetrate the casing and get that battery to basically run away, to have thermal runaway.
Yeah.
There's probably a different way to do that, but if that's what he was trying to do, it was a total failure. And
yeah, so being a former nukes instructor and going to Los Alamos and Lawrence Livermore and some of these places and seeing like, okay, yeah, how to do some really, because they don't just do nukes, they do all kinds of cool stuff there.
Yeah.
I got to go see so many different neat things there, at not just dealing with nukes, but other stuff. Yeah, there's tons of ways. The other one that really got me was the guy's uncle's like, well, he was a Green Beret, so he could have destroyed like 5 city blocks if he wanted to. I was like, I think people have an unrealistic expectation of how proficient in all aspects of warfare that somebody has because they're a SEAL or a Green Beret or an EOD tech.
Sure.
Like, nobody's an expert. I am very good with explosives. That was like my thing. I used to love to, when we were in Afghanistan, it was great. I was like a playground for me because I'm out there. There's this old like ruined village in the middle of the desert. Me and my team member were out there all the time testing out all these new charges that we were building.
Yeah.
For that I kind of learned about at the national labs, because those mud walls in Afghanistan are like concrete. They're like 18 inches thick. That mud is like concrete there. And so we were trying to devise these smaller and smaller charges that we could use to punch holes in walls and things, because you didn't always want to go on the road. Like that's where the danger was at the time. So we always wanted to be able to create access points if we had to, and we did tons of testing. And yeah, that was just my thing when I was like, yeah, you might mess up the lobby with a cyber truck, but in terms of putting enough explosives in there to bring down that building, no, you're going to need the Alfred P. Murrah building, right? That wasn't even, that didn't even take the building down, and that was a huge moving van with thousands of pounds of explosives.
Yeah. Took the whole side off the building.
Yeah.
But didn't knock it off its foundation, but the building was essentially demolished, which, by the way, if you haven't visited the Oklahoma City Memorial, that's an incredible thing. It goes through the whole sequence of events, and it's critical. It's a memory. It's part of U.S. history, and it's a wonderful thing to visit. So, All right. Anything else, man? I got to ask you the key question that I haven't asked yet. But you sat through Elevate Your Leadership, the one-day event that we do here at iFly Virginia Beach about a month or so ago. What'd you think of the experience?
I loved it. It's good. A lot of good perspective and the chance to get in there, and I like the fact that we could talk about things with each other in there.
Yeah, it's a peer group, and
yeah,
I love a lot of sharing.
I'm real big on perspective. Like I always, like you say, lifelong learning. That's huge for me too. I always like hearing other people's perspectives and having conversations with folks, and continuing to expand your network. Like
for sure.
I think it makes you a lot more effective.
Yeah. One of the exercises we do is have you, in your own words, define the word leadership. So you wrote a pretty good definition a couple weeks ago. Do you remember any of it?
Well, okay, here's something else too. It evolves. Like,
yeah.
I remember a little bit of it, but I think, it's not, you can't say it's just any one thing. It's a multitude of things that you do to help facilitate the success of others, right? That's kind of me. I'm more of a servant type leader.
Yeah.
Like I always look at that as like, what can I do to help these people succeed?
Absolutely. Right? Yeah.
And, one thing that I like about your course is you put a lot of emphasis on taking care of yourself holistically to be a better I think that's huge.
Yeah. Yeah. Health and wellness. And to that's a great lead into one more discussion for Magic Mind, because health and wellness leaders have to tend to their health and wellness, and that's done through physical fitness. It's done through mental fitness. It's done through nutrition, and Magic Mind has all natural ingredients, and it contributes significantly to your mental awareness, to your ability to accomplish accurately. You can accomplish in volume, and you can accomplish accurately. So the folks at Magic Mind came to me about a month and a half ago, and they said, hey, try our product. I tried it. I like it. I'm trying new things and experimenting with different things all the time. So if you go to magicmind.com and go to magicmind.com, magicmind.com/EYL, Jan, Jan, magicmind.com/EYLJAN, you're going to receive 45% off of your order. So, Trevor.
Me want to try it now.
I'll give you one, brother. I'll give you one as soon as we're done here. So, what haven't I asked you? Is there anything else that you want people to know about the amazing Trevor Maxwell?
No, I mean, I've got some big things in plans for 2025, kind of taking the next level, my professional career. I'm excited about it. I'm not going to say anything about it yet. I'm trying to keep it a surprise. I know I've told you about it.
Yeah. I'm not going to say anything.
Yeah, no, I my other big thing that I was kind of working on my little side project, I call it Military Money Mistakes. That's like I kind of have revamped it. I wanted it to be a coaching program with the goal of like somebody's 2 years from retirement, they come in and do the coaching program, and that prepares them, setting themselves up financially for military transition.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to teach like all of the stuff that I learned through my formal education and experience doing like financial planning type stuff, sharing that. But, I was like, I could do this course. I could do right now because of what I'm focusing on for 2025. I said, you know what, I'm just going to make a bunch of YouTube videos and share the stuff that I know with people.
Okay.
And continue to do that. And so that's, I'm starting to work on some content for that, to start putting out those videos. I have a page on LinkedIn where I share a lot of things too, insights into, personal finance. So if somebody is, preparing to get out of the military or retire, Military Money Mistakes, the YouTube channel, and on LinkedIn, I'm working on putting some more stuff out there. And I love hearing people's, I don't know where it's going to be a year from now. Maybe it'll turn into a podcast or something like that, where I talk to people and say, hey, what are some of the dumb things you did with money? Because that's my thing. If you ever hear my story, right, I talk about, when I looked back at it and all those deployments I did and bonuses I had, and when I could have retired with somewhere between $700,000 and $800,000 when I retired out of the military. but I didn't. I've had some really cool trucks, and I've got some really, nice guns and stuff, but
Charles Lance.
yeah, I was like, oh, I could still have that stuff today now had I been smart about it. But really what it came down to was two big things, right? I didn't know what I know now about personal finance, and I didn't have anybody that I knew and trusted to help me guide along, bring together that. And so that's what I'm trying to do with that Military Money Mistakes, is be that a source of information and that person that you can reach out to and say, hey, I've got questions about this. What do you think, right?
So how can people reach out to you?
So LinkedIn is probably the best. That's the platform where I'm most active.
Okay. Are there a lot of Trevor Maxwell's on LinkedIn?
I think there are. So look at Trevor Maxwell CHFC. That's
CHFC.
That's but you can see a super handsome picture of me there with
Of course.
My profile picture, and you'll probably see some content that you wouldn't see most financial professionals putting out there. I try to be put a little bit of my personality into my stuff. So if the content you're reading from the Trevor Maxwell isn't humorous, then it's probably not for me. So
okay, all right, that's pretty good. So Trevor Maxwell, CHFC,
yep,
on LinkedIn. Wow, what about the other socials? Instagram.
So right now I focus mostly on. I'm trying to not. I'll expand out to that, but
okay.
Military Money Mistakes YouTube channel. And on TikTok as well, too. I'm trying to put some more stuff out and be more consistent, because, that's something I think I brought up during the courses. Doing all the right things with leadership is great, but if you're not doing consistently, then you're going to lose some ground.
For sure. Perishable skill sets. Okay, so what was the YouTube channel again? Military Money Mistakes?
Yep.
And that's a YouTube channel.
Yep.
Okay, Military Money Mistakes on YouTube. And do you have a website?
Yeah. So, the U.S. Vet Wealth website, you can go there, usvetwealth.com. And then we have a separate space. It's almost like an insider's portal we created called the Military Retirement Blueprint.com, where you can log into this thing. It's like a closed, it's like a space where you can interact with us, but we put out a bunch of content in there. We've made some little mini courses on things like I created an entire personal finance course inside there.
Is that free?
Yeah.
Okay.
You can log in there. You can sign up.
What's the website again?
MilitaryRetirementBlueprint.com.
MilitaryRetirementBlueprint.com.
Yep.
You got a phone number people can just simply call you at?
Yeah, it's 757-493-1131. If you have, I will say this, if you got questions about your VA disability or your pay, I don't do that stuff.
Okay.
It's called VFAS or VA disability.
Okay.
If you have questions about, hey, I don't know if this survivor benefit plan is a good deal for me, or, I have, what do I do with my TSP when I retire? Those are the big things that we tackle.
Okay.
If you have investment related questions, maybe I could, I do some of that stuff.
Uh-huh.
So I'm more than happy to have those conversations. But if you're, if somebody's like, what about this stock? I don't do that.
Yeah.
I do macro level strategy stuff, right? But yeah, I'm more than happy to chat and see what I can do to help out. And then, any other veterans out there working in the space that work with transitioning military people that want to connect. I love doing that because that's kind of who I serve. And, if I can expand my network and have another value-added person there that I can refer people to for things that I don't do, then, I'm all about it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Trevor, thank you so much for coming on the Elevate Your Leadership podcast, brother.
Yeah, thank you. Look forward to, contributing and help out however I can, too. So.
All right. Thanks, man.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Elevate Your Leadership podcast. To contact Bob directly or to learn more about how Bob can advance you and your organization through leadership training, team building, executive coaching, and public speaking, visit robertpizzini.com. Robert, Pizzini.com, and connect with him on LinkedIn.